There are three kinds of people in this world: those who inherit power, those who steal it, and those who are handed a contract at midnight and told to choose which one they want to be. Marin Holt was about to become the third kind. She stood in the rain outside the Mandarin Oriental in Manhattan, her secondhand trench coat doing absolutely nothing against the October cold, staring at a text message that had arrived exactly 4 minutes ago from a number she didn't recognize. Penthouse Suite, 11 p.m., come alone. This is about Callum Devereaux. Marin had spent the last 6 months building a file on Callum Devereaux thick enough to bury him. The oil magnate, the untouchable, the man whose Greenland mineral extraction deals were either the future of renewable energy or the greatest ecological crime of the decade, depending on which Senate hearing you watched. She'd tracked his offshore accounts, his shell companies, his suspiciously timed stock market moves that smelled like insider trading dipped in Arctic ice. She was supposed to destroy him. That was the job. The people who'd hired her, a shadowy consortium of activist investors who called themselves the Dominion Collective, had been very clear. Expose Callum Devereaux's illegal Greenland operations. Prove he was strip mining protected land under the guise of rare earth mineral extraction. Torch his reputation so badly that his own board would vote him out before Christmas. They'd offered her $250,000, enough to finally launch her fintech startup, enough to stop eating ramen in a bushwick studio that smelled like someone else's failure. Enough to prove that a girl from a Wyoming trailer park who taught herself equity analysis from library books could take down a billionaire. Marin had said yes. Now, standing in the rain with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and her heart doing something uncomfortable in her chest, she wondered if she'd made the deal with the wrong side. She walked into the lobby. The elevator to the penthouse required a keycard. The concierge handed it to her without asking her name. Someone had been expecting her. The doors opened on the 53rd floor, and Marin stepped into a world that smelt like old money and new danger. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like it was a chessboard. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and cold. Everything in the room looked like it had been designed to intimidate. And then she saw him. Callum Devereaux stood by the window with his back to her, a tumbler of whiskey in one hand, his suit jacket discarded on the arm of a leather chair. He was taller than she'd expected, broader, the kind of man who looked like he could break you in half financially or physically, and you wouldn't know which one hurt more until it was already done. He didn't turn around. "You're late." His voice was low, controlled, American with a faint edge of something European buried underneath. Old boarding schools, summer homes in the Alps, the kind of accent people only had when they'd spent their entire lives being important. Marin dropped her bag on the floor. "I didn't exactly give you an address. I gave you enough." He turned. Marin had seen his photo. Forbes, Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal. But photos didn't prepare you for the reality of Callum Devereaux in a room. He was 38, dark-haired, sharp-jawed, with the kind of face that made you forget he controlled $70 billion in global assets until he reminded you with a single look. His eyes were gray, cold, the kind of eyes that had watched empires rise and fall and hadn't blinked once. He studied her the way you'd study a stock ticker right before you shorted it. "You're younger than I thought. You're exactly as arrogant as I thought." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "Sit." "I'd rather stand." "Suit yourself." He walked to the bar, poured a second glass of whiskey, and set it on the table between them. Marin didn't touch it. "You know who I am." Callum said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone knows who you are." And you know why you're here. Marin crossed her arms. Why don't you tell me? Callum leaned against the edge of the table, casual, in a way that felt like a threat. Because 6 months ago, someone hired you to take me down. Because you've been building a file on my Greenland operations. Because you think I'm a criminal. And because, he paused, his eyes locking onto hers, you're good enough that I noticed. Marin's pulse kicked. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He picked up a folder from the table and tossed it toward her. It landed at her feet. Marin bent down, opened it. Her breath stopped. Inside were copies of every encrypted email she sent to the Dominion Collective, every bank record she'd flagged, every offshore account she traced. Her entire investigation printed and bound like evidence in a trial she didn't know she was part of. How did you... I own a security firm that makes the NSA look like mall cops. You were sloppy. Marin's hands tightened on the folder. If you know what I'm doing, why am I still breathing? Because I have a better offer. He stepped closer, close enough that Marin could smell his cologne, something dark, expensive, sandalwood and smoke, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I need a fiancée, Callum said quietly. Marin blinked. Excuse me? 6 months. You pretend to be engaged to me, you attend events, you smile for cameras, you play the role of the woman who finally made Callum Devereaux believe in love. And at the end of 6 months, we stage a quiet breakup, you walk away with $5 million, and I close the biggest deal of my career. Marin stared at him. You're insane. I'm serious. Why would the hell would you need a fake fiancé? Callum's jaw tightened. Because the Greenland Arctic Council won't approve my rare earth extraction contract unless I prove I'm not the soulless corporate predator everyone thinks I am. They want stability, commitment, a man who's building a future, not just strip mining it. They want to see me settled, married, human. So, hire an actress. I need someone who understands finance, someone who can talk stock market strategy at a donor dinner and personal finance reform at a Senate hearing without sounding like a script, someone who's hungry enough to play the game and smart enough to not screw it up. He tilted his head. You're perfect. Marin laughed. It came out bitter. You want me to help you close a deal that I spent 6 months trying to destroy? Yes. Why would I ever say yes? Callum's eyes didn't waver. Because the people who hired you don't care about Greenland. They care about shorting my stock, and when you expose me, they'll make a fortune, pay you your fee, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you helped a bunch of hedge fund parasites get richer while the only real chance at carbon-neutral rare earth extraction dies in a boardroom. Marin's throat tightened. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out his phone, swiped, and turned the screen toward her. It was a trading dashboard, real-time stock positions. The Dominion Collective has shorted Devereaux Energy to the tune of $4.2 billion. If Callum's Greenland deal collapses, they'll make a killing. If Marin exposes him, she'd be their weapon. I'm not the villain here, Callum said quietly, but I will be if you make me one. Marin's hands were shaking. She hated that they were shaking. $5 million, she said. $5 million. In an offshore account, untraceable, yours the day we break up. And if I say no? Callum's smile was cold. Then I leak your investigation to the collective as a failed infiltration attempt, and they'll assume you're working for me. You'll be blacklisted, unhireable, and I'll make sure every personal finance startup investor in New York knows your name for all the wrong reasons. Marin wanted to hit him. She wanted to walk out. She wanted to do anything except what she was about to do. 6 months, she said. 6 months. And I'm gone. Deal. He held out his hand. Marin stared at it. This was the moment, the decision that would change everything. The contract signed in a penthouse at midnight with a man she was supposed to hate. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm. It lasted 2 seconds too long. "Welcome to the family, Miss Holt," Callum said. And Marin realized she just agreed to become engaged to the most dangerous man in America. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who deserves to hear what happens next. And here's the thing. There's someone out there who told Marin she'd never amount to anything. Someone who said girls from trailer parks don't sit across from billionaires. Prove them wrong. Subscribe. Because these stories, they're not just entertainment. They're proof that the world is bigger, stranger, and more electric than anyone wants to admit. And you're part of that now. The first event was 3 days later, a private investor gala at the Pierre Hotel. 200 of the richest people in America gathered in a ballroom that looked like it had been dipped in gold and left to dry under chandeliers that cost more than Marin's childhood home. She stood in front of the mirror in the hotel suite Callum had booked for her, staring at a woman she didn't recognize. The dress was midnight blue, custom fitted, with a neckline that suggested elegance and the slit that promised danger. Her hair had been blown out by a stylist who'd been sent to her apartment that morning with instructions from Callum's assistant. Make her unforgettable. Marin looked unforgettable. She also looked like a liar. There was a knock on the door. Callum walked in without waiting for an answer. He was in a tuxedo, black tie, cufflinks that probably cost more than her laptop. He stopped when he saw her. For the first time since they'd met, his expression flickered. "You clean up," he said. "You're a poet." His mouth twitched again, that almost smile. "We need to go over the story." The story. How we met, how I proposed, what we tell people when they ask why the hell Callum Devereaux is suddenly engaged. Marin crossed her arms. "What's the official version?" Callum stepped closer. "You were consulting on a renewable energy investment pitch. I was skeptical. You challenged me in front of my entire board. I was impressed. We started talking. One thing led to another. That's boring. It's believable. It's a stock market transaction with feelings." Callum's eyes narrowed. "Fine. What would you say?" Marin met his gaze. "I'd say you hired me because you were desperate. I'd say you needed someone who could make you look human because deep down, you're terrified people will figure out you're not." The room went silent. Callum's jaw tightened. For a second, Marin thought she'd gone too far. And then he laughed. It was low, rough, and completely unexpected. "You're going to be a problem," he said. "That's what you're paying me for." He held out his arm. "Shall we?" Marin looped her hand through his elbow. They walked into the gala together. The room turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads swiveled, cameras flashed. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Is that Callum Devereaux with a date?" Marin felt every eye on her. She smiled. Callum's hand settled on the small of her back, possessive and steady, and she hated how right it felt. They moved through the room like a storm system. People gravitated toward them. Investors, senators, old money in new tuxedos. Everyone wanted to shake Callum's hand. Everyone wanted to know who she was. "This is Marin," Callum said over and over. "My fiancée." The word landed like a bomb every time. By the third introduction, Marin had perfected her smile. By the fifth, she'd memorized the script. By the seventh, she almost believed it. They were standing by the bar when a woman approached. She was tall, blonde, expensive in the way that only came from generational wealth and a personal trainer who made house calls. Her dress was white. Her smile was sharp. "Callum," she said. Her voice was silk wrapped around a knife. Callum's entire body went rigid. Sloane Kirby, his ex-wife, the private equity shark who still owns 18% of Devereaux Energy and a vendetta that could cut through steel. Sloane's eyes slid to Marin. "And who's this?" "Marin Holt," Marin said, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." Sloane didn't shake it. She looked at Callum. "You're engaged?" "Yes." "How sudden?" "Not really." "How long have you been together?" "Long enough," Callum said. Sloane's smile widened. "I'm sure." She turned to Marin. "Did he mention me, did he?" Marin kept her expression neutral. "He mentioned you." "Did he mention that we were married for 6 years? That he helped me build half of what he owns? That he signed a post-nuptial agreement promising me a seat on the board for life, and then tried to buy me out the second the ink dried on the divorce?" Callum's voice was ice. "Sloane. Or did he just tell you the version where I'm the bitter ex-wife who couldn't handle his ambition?" Marin looked at Callum. His face was unreadable. She looked back at Sloane. "He told me you're brilliant, dangerous, and that you're the only person in this room who could destroy him if you wanted to." Sloane blinked. Callum's hand tightened on Marin's back. "But he also told me," Marin insinuated, "that you won't, because you're too smart to burn down an empire you still profit from." Sloane stared at her for a long, cold moment. Then she laughed. "I like her, Callum. She's got teeth." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "But if you hurt him, sweetheart, you'll find out I've got fangs." She walked away. Marin exhaled slowly. Callum leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. That was reckless. That was fun. "She'll come after you now. Let her." Callum pushed back, studying her face. "You're not afraid of her." "Should I be?" "Most people are." Marin met his eyes. "I'm not most people." Something shifted in his expression. Something dangerous and complicated and way too real for a fake engagement. "No," Callum said, quietly. "You're not." They stayed at the gala for another 2 hours. They danced once. Callum was a better dancer than he had any right to be. His hand stayed on her waist the entire time, and Marin told herself it was just part of the performance. She told herself she wasn't leaning into him. She told herself a lot of things. By the time they left, Marin's feet ached and her face hurt from smiling. Callum walked her back to her suite, his hand still on her back, and Marin wondered if he even realized he was doing it. They stopped outside her door. "You did well tonight," Callum said. "You're surprised." "I'm not." Marin looked up at him. "Why me, Callum? Really, you could have hired anyone, a model, an actress, someone who'd be a hell of a lot easier to control. Why did you pick the woman who's been trying to destroy you?" Callum was quiet for a long moment. "Because everyone else would have lied to me," he said finally. Marin's breath caught. Callum stepped back. "Good night, Marin." He walked away before she could respond. Marin stood in the hallway, her heart doing something complicated and stupid, and wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life, or the most dangerous. The next morning, Marin's phone exploded. Texts, emails, calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Her social media accounts she barely used, were flooded with followers, messages, and requests. She opened Instagram. The first post was a photo from last night. Marin and Callum on the dance floor, his hand on her waist, her head tilted toward him like they were sharing a secret. The caption read, "Billionaire oil heir Callum Devereaux confirms engagement to mysterious financial analyst Marin Holt. Sources say she's the woman who finally melted the iceberg. Power couple, Greenland, stock market royalty." It had 300,000 likes. Marin stared at her phone. This was real now. The world thought she was engaged to Callum Devereaux. The world thought she was in love with him. And the worst part, When she looked at that photo, at the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room, she could almost believe it too. Her phone buzzed. A text from Callum. "Pack a bag. We're going to Greenland." Marin's stomach dropped. She texted back. "When?" "Tomorrow. The Arctic Council wants to meet you. We need to sell this." Marin sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking. This wasn't just a gala anymore. This wasn't just playing dress up at fancy parties. This was Greenland. This was the deal. This was the lie she was about to live in front of the people who could make or break Callum's entire future. And somewhere, buried under all the fear and adrenaline, was a question Marin didn't want to ask herself. What if she didn't want it to be a lie anymore? Greenland in November was the kind of cold that made you rethink every decision you'd ever made. Marin stood on the tarmac in Nuuk, the wind cutting through her coat like a blade, watching Callum talk to a man in a parka who looked like he'd been born in a blizzard. The sky was gray. The mountains were brutal. Everything about this place felt like it was designed to remind you that nature didn't care about your plans. Callum finished his conversation and walked back to her. His hair was blown sideways. He looked annoyingly unbothered by the cold. "Welcome to Greenland," he said. "It's freezing." "It's character building." Marin glared at him. "How long are we staying?" 4 days. We're meeting with the Arctic Council tomorrow. Tonight, we're having dinner with the Minister of Natural Resources. He wants to meet my fiancée." "Of course he does." Callum's mouth twitched. "You're going to charm him." "I'm going to try not to stab him with a fork." "That works too." They drove into town in a black SUV that smelled like diesel and ambition. Nuuk was small, colorful, beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. The houses were painted red and blue and yellow, bright spots against the gray sky. It looked like a place where people survived, not thrived. Their hotel was surprisingly nice, modern, sleek, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Marin's room was next to Callum's. Of course it was. She unpacked, showered, changed into something that wouldn't get her laughed out of a government dinner, and met Callum in the lobby at 7. He was in a suit, dark gray, no tie. He looked like a man who could negotiate $1 billion deal and then bury you in a fjord without breaking a sweat. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Let's go." Dinner was at a restaurant that overlooked the water. The Minister of Natural Resources was a man named Henrik Peterson, mid-50s with kind eyes and a handshake that felt like a test. His wife, Astrid, was warm, curious, and immediately suspicious of Marin in the way that only smart women could be. They sat, ordered, made small talk about the weather, the oil industry, the future of Arctic policy. And then Astrid looked at Marin and said, "So, how did you two meet?" Marin had practiced this. She knew the script. But when she opened her mouth, what came out wasn't the script. "I was hired to investigate him," Marin said. The table went silent. Callum's eyes snapped at hers. Marin kept going. "I'm a financial analyst. I was hired by a group of investors to build a case against Callum's Greenland operations. I spent 6 months digging into his accounts, his deals, his offshore holdings. I was supposed to prove he was a criminal. And then," she paused, "I realized he wasn't." Henrik leaned forward. "What changed your mind?" Marin looked at Callum. His expression was unreadable. "I found something no one else knew. Callum's not here to strip mine Greenland. He's here to build the first carbon-negative rare earth extraction operation in the world. He's developing a closed-loop system that recycles 98% of the water used in the process. He's partnering with local Inuit communities to ensure they benefit from the revenue. He's trying to prove that oil companies can evolve, that they don't have to be the villain." She looked back at Henrik. And when I realized that, I couldn't bury him. So I joined him instead. The silence stretched. Then Henrik smiled. That, he said, is the best love story I've heard in years. Astrid raised her glance. "'Tis second chances." They toasted. Callum's eyes stayed on Maren the entire time. After dinner, they walked back to the hotel. The streets were quiet. The sky was dark. The northern lights were starting to flicker above them, green and ghostly. Callum stopped walking. Maren turned. "What? Why did you say that?" "Say what?" "The truth. You could have stuck to the script. You didn't have to." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "You made it real." Maren's heart was pounding. "It is real, isn't it?" Callum stared at her. "Maren, but you don't know me." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." His voice was rough. "You know the version of me I let you see. You don't know what I've done, who I've hurt. You don't know." "Then tell me." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I do, you'll leave." Maren stepped closer. "Try me." Callum looked at her like a grenade with a pin pulled, and then he told her. "My brother died in one of my oil rigs 7 years ago, North Sea. There was an explosion. Safety protocols failed. He was 26. I was the one who signed off on the cost-cutting measures that made it happen." Maren's breath stopped. "I've spent every day since trying to build something that would make his death mean something. I've poured billions into renewable energy. I've developed technology that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. I've turned my family's oil empire into the one company that might actually help fix the mess we made. But it doesn't matter because he's still dead, and it's still my fault." His voice broke on the last word. Maren reached for his hand. He pulled back. "Don't, Maren. Don't try to fix me. I'm not fixable." "I'm not trying to fix you, Maren. I'm trying to tell you that you're not alone." Callum looked at her. His eyes were wet. "You should go," he said. "Callum, please." Maren wanted to stay. She wanted to grab him and make him listen. She wanted to tell him that grief didn't make him irredeemable, that guilt wasn't a life sentence, that he was allowed to forgive himself. But she didn't. She walked away, and Callum stood alone under the northern lights watching her go. "You're still here. That means something. That means you're the kind of person who doesn't walk away when things get complicated. So here's the ask. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell me if you think Maren should have stayed or if she made the right call. Because the only way stories like this survive is if people like you fight for them. And trust me, what's coming next is going to make you glad you stayed. The Arctic Council meeting was the next morning. It was held in a building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Concrete, glass, freezing cold. Maren sat next to Callum at a long table, facing a panel of 8 people who held the future of his Greenland deal in their hands. Henrik was there. So was Astrid. So were 6 other officials who looked like they'd been born skeptical. The chairman, a woman named Signe Larsson, folded her hands on the table and looked directly at Callum. "Mr. Devereaux," she said, "we've reviewed your proposal. It's ambitious, technically sound, but we have concerns." "I'm listening," Callum said. "Your company has a history of environmental violations. Your father's offshore drilling operations in the 1990s caused lasting damage to Arctic ecosystems. Your brother's death, while tragic, was the result of negligence. You're asking us to trust you with one of the most fragile environments on the planet. Why should we believe you've changed?" Callum didn't flinch. "Because I have." "Prove it." Callum opened the folder. Inside were documents, contracts, blueprints, environmental impact studies. He walked him through every detail of his plan. The closed-loop water system, the carbon offsets, the revenue sharing agreements with local communities. It was flawless. It was also not enough. Signe looked at Marin. Miss Holt, you were hired to investigate Mr. Devereaux's operations. What did you find? Marin's pulse spiked. This was it. This was the moment where she could end him, where she could tell the truth, that she'd been hired by short sellers, that Callum's deal was built on desperation, that this engagement was fake. She could destroy him, or she could save him. Marin met Callum's eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She turned back to Signe. I found the man who spent 7 years trying to atone for a mistake that cost him everything, Marin said. I found a company that's invested more in renewable energy research than any other oil company in the world. I found a deal that could change the way we extract resources without destroying the planet in the process. And I found someone who's so terrified of failing again that he's willing to risk everything to prove he's not his father. She paused. I also found the man I'm going to marry. So if you're asking me if you should trust him, yes, you should. Because I do. The room was silent. Signe leaned back in her chair. That's quite an endorsement. It's the truth. Signe looked at Callum, then back at Marin. We'll make our decision by the end of the week, she said. The meeting ended. Callum didn't speak until they were back in the car. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did. Why? Marin looked at him. Because I meant it. Callum's hand found hers. He didn't let go. They flew back to New York the next day. The week passed in a blur. Marin moved through her life on autopilot, waiting for the call that would tell her if Callum's deal had been approved or if everything they'd built, real and fake, had been for nothing. She didn't hear from Callum. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't show up at her apartment like he had a dozen times before. And Marin realized he was doing what he always did. He was pulling away. The call came on a Friday. Callum's assistant, polite, professional. The Art the Council approved the deal. Mr. Devereaux wanted you to know. Your payment will be wired by the end of the day. He said to thank you for your service. Marin hung up. She sat on her couch staring at her phone. Your service. That's what this had been to him. A transaction. A contract. 6 months of playing pretend, and now it was over. She should have felt relieved. She felt gutted. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Turn on CNBC. Marin grabbed the remote. The headline flashed across the screen. Devereaux Energy secures historic Greenland rare earth deal. Stock surges 34%. And there was Callum standing at a podium, giving a press conference. This deal represents the future of responsible resource extraction. It's proof that we can build a sustainable economy without sacrificing innovation or progress. And I couldn't have done it without... He stopped. His eyes flicked off camera. Without the woman who believed in me when no one else did. Marin's breath caught. The reporter asked, Are you referring to your fiancée Marin Holt? Callum's jaw tightened. Yes. Will she be joining you at the signing ceremony next week? Callum looked directly into the camera. That's up to her. Marin turned off the TV. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed her coat. She was halfway to the door when someone knocked. She opened it. Callum stood in the hallway, soaking wet from the rain, his hair a mess, his tie loose. He looked like he ran the entire way from his office. You left, Marin said. I know. You didn't call. I know. You sent your assistant to fire me like I was an employee. Callum flinched. I'm sorry. Why are you here, Callum? He stepped closer. Because I'm an idiot. Because I'm terrified. Because every single person I've ever loved has either left me or died. And I convinced myself that if I pushed you away first, it would hurt less. But it doesn't. It just hurts. Marin's eyes burned. I don't want this to be fake anymore, Callum said. I don't want a contract or a timeline or an exit strategy. I just want you. And I know that's unfair. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Marin stared at him. You're a mess, she said. I know. You're emotionally unavailable. I'm working on it. You drive me insane. I know that too. Marin stepped forward. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Callum's expression broke. Marin! She kissed him. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote history, the kind that made contracts into promises, the kind that made you believe in second chances even when the world told you not to. When they pulled apart, Callum rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I should have said it weeks ago. I love you. Marin smiled. I know. You know? I'm a financial analyst, Callum. I'm very good at reading data. He laughed. Actually laughed. It was the best sound Marin had ever heard. Does this mean you'll come to the signing ceremony? Only if you introduce me as your fiancée, the real one this time. Deal. They stood in the doorway, rain dripping onto the floor, the rest of the world forgotten. And for the first time in 7 years, Callum Devereaux stopped running from the past. He chose the future instead. 3 months later, Marin stood in a conference room in Nuuk, Greenland, watching Callum sign the final contract that would change the Arctic forever. The Arctic Rare Earth Extraction Project was officially underway. Carbon negative, community focused, revolutionary. Everything he promised, everything she believed in. Henrik shook Callum's hand. Astrid hugged Marin. The room erupted in applause. And when it was over, Callum turned to Marin, took her hand, and said, Ready to go home? Marin smiled. Where's home? Wherever you are. She kissed him. And somewhere buried under all the contracts and stock tickers and billion-dollar deals was a girl from a Wyoming trailer park and the man who spent his whole life trying to atone for a single mistake. They'd both been terrified of failing, but they'd learned something better. They'd learned how to fall and how to get back up together. If you made it to the end, you're part of something now. You've heard a story that most people will scroll past. You've stayed when it got complicated. You've believed when it got messy. So here's the final ask. Subscribe, share this, tell someone that stories like this exist, because the next one is already waiting, and it's going to be just as electric, just as dangerous, and just as impossible to walk away from. Thank you for being here. Now let's do this again.